Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Faith Defend the Faith. My name is William Hemsworth. It's great to be with you all on this episode. Pleased to have my guest back on, Charles Johnston. He's the author of a great book called Beauty of the Mass. Charles, how you doing today?
Good, William. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, and thanks again for coming back on. Yeah,
Thanks for
before
having
we,
me.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, before we get into our topic, I got to ask, how's the book going?
Uh, not much more progress than the last time we talked. I think the last time we talked about a year and a half ago, I ended up coming down with COVID not too long after that, and then just
Right,
kind of
right.
it's one of them things. Like even after it's gone, it affects it. It feels like I'm more forgetful than ever. I don't know if it's just in my mind.
You're not the only one I've heard that from, so don't feel bad. But
Yeah.
I know I recommend your book to all the people coming through RCA, and hopefully next year, my priest said maybe we'll get some copies. So hopefully that
Awesome.
comes to fruition. So it's a great resource out there for anyone who checks it out. Check out the link that I'm going to have in the notes to this episode. Charles, I want to talk to you today. Last time we talked about what to expect when we're going through RCIA, but
Hmm.
now we're head on in Lent, and today I wanted to talk to you about what a convert can expect going through the Easter Triduum. And so maybe you can start explaining what that actually is first before we get into what they can expect.
Right. You can expect to spend a lot of time in church,
Right. Yes.
and not in a bad way. It's one of them things like Easter Vigil. I had a bunch of people like Easter Vigil is the end of the Triduum. I had a bunch of people telling me when I started ICIA, oh man, it's going to be hours and it's 3 hours long. And can you imagine being in church for 3 hours long? And I was thinking like, I'm a Protestant. That's that isn't really that's not that long sometimes. But
Right.
it flies by. It's you blink and it's over, So
Right.
yeah, but Triduum. So Triduum starts. It's the shortest of the three liturgical. No, not the three liturgical. It's a 3-day season. It's the shortest of all the liturgical seasons, and it begins on Holy Thursday. So that's the day that our Lord had the Last Supper with his apostles, and then it continues on through Good Friday, and it ends at Easter Vigil, so on Holy Saturday. So it's 3 days, and generally we celebrate three different liturgies, in the 3 days. So on Holy Thursday, you'll have the Mass of the Lord's Supper, and that happens in the evening on Holy Thursday, and that is, kind of give you an overview of it. That's
Sure.
basically the first ever Mass was the Last Supper. That's where Jesus, the words we hear every Sunday at Mass, this is my body given up for you, this is my blood, poured out for many for the sins of many. Do this in remembrance of me. Those words, the words of institution, were first spoken at the Last Supper. So the Last Supper is the institution of the Mass. That's what we're celebrating. And because the Mass was is a sacrifice, it's the representation of the once and for all sacrifice on Calvary. Uh, you think like, well, hold on a second here. The Last Supper was on Thursday. Calvary happens on Friday, and then really everything isn't complete until the resurrection. Because if Christ just died but didn't rise, then what good is that? You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Right.
there's been plenty of people that's died for their beliefs or been killed by the government over the years. But the unique thing about Jesus Christ is he died and then he came back. Just like Jonah, 3 days in the whale. That's what he told the people up in Capernaum, that the sign of Jonah, 3 days in the belly of the whale, I'll be 3 days in the earth. And that's a sign you get.
Mhm.
So he comes back to life on Easter Sunday. But, the vigil, the way it works is the vigil we're celebrating at sundown, kind of like the Jewish way of reckoning time. They're
Mhm.
sundown to sundown rather than midnight to midnight like we are, modern day and age. But so the Last Supper is the institution of the Mass, but that liturgy, that sacrifice of Christ, begins at the Last Supper. It really kind of reaches its high pinnacle point on Good Friday at the Lord's crucifixion, but
Mhm.
then it isn't complete until he rises from the grave. So that's why Triduum is that 3-day long celebration, kind of commemoration. I know celebration sounds too happy, because it's kind of it's a somber. You say you're celebrating Mass, for
Right.
on Good Friday. You don't have Mass on Good Friday, but that's Holy Thursday.
Oh, still with me, Charles? You broke up there.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Okay, there you are. We kind of lost you for a second there.
yeah. So
Yeah, so we got the 3-day
sorry.
season there, and like you said, it's
Mhm.
culminates with the Easter Vigil. Yeah, and like you said, I heard that same thing. It's 3 hours long and all this stuff, but it doesn't seem like it when you're sitting in it. There's just so much going on. Um,
Yeah,
just
there's
seems
so
like
many
it
moving
seems like it
parts and
really
stuff.
flies
So it's
by.
just, yeah, it does. And you're pretty engaged the whole time, especially if you're, if you're one of the catechumens, the candidates, or a sponsor, you're pretty engaged through the whole
Right.
thing. You know, so yeah, it flies by.
Right. So Holy Thursday, the Lord's Supper.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's what's exactly happening at that liturgy? Because there's so much that we can do a whole episode just on that one. But
right. Well, it's a couple. It's called the Mass of the Lord's Supper, and like I said, it's where the first Mass ever took place. It's the institution of the Mass. That's where
right,
Jesus instructed the apostles, who were the first priests, to do this in memory of me. So this is where he instructs them to continue this. What I'm about to show you, continue it on. And this is my body. This is my blood. Uh, so that's the first ever Mass, but it's also another thing that takes place in the liturgy at the Lord's Supper that doesn't happen, once a year, is the washing of the feet,
right.
and that's where we get the word Maundy Thursday. Like sometimes you'll hear it Holy Thursday,
Hmm.
sometimes you'll hear it called Maundy Thursday. That comes from the word mandatum. It's mandate, basically. It's where Jesus said, "A new command I give you." In Latin, it would be basically like a new mandate I give you. Love each other as I have loved you, and that's what he said when he was washing their feet. And so that's how we're supposed to love one another. And that's what the foot washing represents. It's a sign of humility, first off. Jesus,
Hmm.
the creator of the universe, is washing the mud. And like, think how dirty someone's foot would be in first century Jerusalem, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Gross.
wearing, open toed shoes. While I don't like, I hate when I see someone wearing open toed shoes at like a fair, and that's somewhat paved. Imagine like the animals and like the mud and just and all over your feet. And that's why Peter said, no, Lord, don't wash my feet, because he didn't want, his master to be washing his feet, because that was the job of a slave.
Right,
And Jesus washed their feet and told them that a new command I give you, love each other as I have loved you. And how did Christ love us? It's to the cross. So
right,
that's how much we're supposed to love one another. So that's like raising it up another level. So it isn't just love your neighbor as yourself, it's love each other as I loved you. So it's like Jesus is just constantly elevating things. Like don't commit murder, eye for an eye, and he tells them, if you have hate in your heart for your
you've
brother,
already done
you've
it.
killed him in your heart. Right. So like he's just completely like everything's ratcheting it up, and it seems like it's this impossible level, but with Christ all things are possible. So, but yeah,
Right.
that's why
So
it's called Body Thursday.
yeah, and so the priest washes the feet. Does he
Mhm.
normally just wash the feet of the candidates and the catechumens, or is it anyone in the parish?
I've seen it done. I've seen it done several different ways. Last year, I believe, because we had more than 12, because usually they pick 12 people because
Right.
the 12 apostles. Last year, I think we had more than 12 people going through RCIA. So they picked they kind of asked people, anyone want to volunteer? And then a few people did, and then the rest of the people got voluntold. Who was going up to get their feet washed. But I don't believe it was any catechumens. I think it was only candidates, like already baptized. I'm
Okay.
not sure on that. But yeah, and sometimes I've seen just random, parishioners were selected for whatever reason. I didn't get into the mechanics of how
Okay.
they got selected. Yeah. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's the RCI class, sometimes it's other people.
and see, I've seen the opposite. It's been the people coming into the church to get their feet washed. So I guess
Right.
what would you say to someone who's coming into the church and they object, like maybe they don't like people touching their feet, which that's my phobia, I guess. I don't like people touching my feet. But
Right.
what would you say to someone like that, like if they just have reservations?
I don't know. I mean, probably tell them, it's not that big of a. I have a thing with like public speaking, and now I've given a bunch of public talks, and that was always my thing. Like I don't like public speaking, but sometimes I just, you know, power through and just do it anyway. But I would tell them, do your best if you can. Some people just absolutely can't get over certain phobias. You know, my
Right.
wife's scared of heights, and she just can't. We went to the Grand Canyon. She got within about 100 feet of the edge, and she just completely freaked out. You know,
Right.
so some people just can't get over. If you could get over it, if you don't like people touching your feet, or you don't want to be up, you know, you're up on basically up at the altar, you know, sitting in a chair, and you don't want to be front and center. Well, you know, you're going to be front and center in RCI anyway. So what does that matter?
Right. Excuse me. I mean, at the same time, if you have that whole horrible phobia and you start freaking out, I'm sure,
Right.
I'm
They'll
sure
give
there'll
you a
be an
pass.
exception made. Right.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a necessary right. Like it isn't one of the things like, well, you have to have water poured on your head to be baptized. You know, it isn't a necessary right. Like you can skip it. Nobody's gonna really say like, well, you can't enter the church now because you never had your feet washed.
Right. No, from Holy Thursday we go on to Good Friday.
Right.
And you mentioned a moment ago that's one of the that's there's no mass on Good Friday. So why
No
is
mask.
that? What actually happens on Good Friday inside the church?
Well, so on Holy Thursday, what happens? So every time there's mass, most parishes this is usually they reserve some of the Eucharist and put it in the tabernacle. And whenever there's Eucharist reserved in the tabernacle, there's the red sanctuary lamp. It's basically a red candle that's
Right.
next to the tabernacle. Generally, it's supposed to be that's behind the altar. Sometimes it's kind of off to the side a little bit. Sometimes it's a side chapel, but they reserve the Eucharist in the tabernacle. Now, I'd imagine maybe there might be instances where they, you know, there's 100 people in church, there's 60 consecrated hosts on the altar, they get 40 out of the tabernacle, and then they don't have any left over. I've actually never seen that. They always have some left over where they put back in the tabernacle, but I can't say that that's 100% of the time, but I'm pretty sure. But anyhow, what they do on Holy Thursday is they open the door of the tabernacle and they part. There's a curtain inside there. They part the curtain, and they take the Eucharist out, any Eucharist that's left over from Holy Thursday, and they consecrate enough Eucharist so you know the sacristans and the deacon and the priest will know like we have X many people here on a normal Holy Good Friday, so that's how many we're gonna have extra Eucharist because there's no Mass on Good Friday, so you can't consecrate any more Eucharist because that's the only place the Eucharist can be consecrated and you know turn from bread and wine to the body and blood of our Lord is in a Mass. So there's like no side, you know, side right, like where you can do like a baptism outside of mass, or you can do
Right.
different things out. You can't. There's no side right for consecration. It only happens in mass, and there's no masses on Good Friday. So they consecrate more than enough to keep over, and they take that out at the end of the mass of the Lord's Supper. There's a separate rite. So the mass doesn't end. So at the end of normal masses, you hear the mass is ended, go in peace, and you say thanks be to God. They play a recessional hymn, the priest walks out the door, and then everyone follows after him. During the Mass of the Lord's Supper, they I think the deacon says go in peace, but they don't say the mass is ended. They just walk off the
Mm.
altar. And usually the sacristans will come up and like start stripping the altar and taking the linens down and taking all the stuff off the altar. The altar gets stripped bare, so it's just the stone or wood or whatever it's made out of there, you know, sitting there with the crucifix on it. And they open the tabernacle, and the deacon will take the Eucharist out of the tabernacle, and they do a procession. I've seen it done a couple different ways. I've seen like a real solemn procession where it goes around the church, you know, several times and lots of singing and lots of incense. I've seen kind of more of a toned down where they just kind of walk around once, you know.
Right.
So, but they do a procession with the Eucharist. They come out and they take it to what's called an altar of repose, and it's separate from the tabernacle. It's usually in the church somewhere. It could be in a side chapel too, and they set it out, set the Eucharist out, just like it would be during like adoration. But it's not in a monstrance or anything. It's usually like in like a kind of like a mini tabernacle, you know.
Hmm.
And what they do is you can visit with Jesus and you can, you know, venerate him the same way you would if it was adoration. And they invite you, you know, they sing all the songs and stuff, but then they invite you to just stay. And just like Jesus said in the garden, you know, because this is what we're thinking, what's happening here is Jesus leaves the Last Supper and he goes to the garden. So that's what the procession is, him going to the garden. Because from Mount Zion to the Garden of Gethsemane is, you know, it's not that long of a walk. It's maybe a mile down through the valley of Kidron up on the other side of the Mount of Olives. And you're processing, Jesus is processing there, and then you're staying with him. And that's what he said to the apostles. Can't you stay and pray? You know, can't you stay awake for 1 hour and pray? You know?
Right.
So you're invited by the priest to stay and pray with Jesus. And a tradition that I heard of, and now, here I am in Phoenix, Arizona. It's, very suburban, very spread. This would be very hard to do. But where I grew up in New York, New York City, this would have been a lot of, too bad I wasn't Catholic back then. But there's a tradition where you walk to 7 different churches and visit Jesus in these 7 different churches, kind of
Wow.
like how Jesus was in, where Peter and John went and tried to get in Caiaphas's house was on trial. So this all happened on that night of Holy Thursday, you know? So you go and you visit these 7 different churches to visit with Jesus. It was kind of like I guess it was kind of maybe a European tradition, but I think the nearest church to my parish is like 5 miles away. And then the nearest one to that is about another 7 or 8 miles. So after 2, I'd probably be done for. That would be it. But
That's exactly
if
how it
you're
is here. That's how it is here.
yeah,
I can't imagine
everything's, I
doing
mean,
it.
everything's spread out here. Yeah. No, if you're in a more, like I said, growing up in New York City, I've definitely done this. But I wasn't Catholic at the time, so I knew. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful tradition, the visiting Jesus to 7 different churches. And then the altar repose and stay out all night. And usually I'll have, like the standing guard, and you visit with Jesus. And then the next day is Good Friday. And Good Friday is just like a somber, we're remembering the price, for
Yeah.
which we were redeemed, the price of the cost to redeem us. I was just thinking about how I went to confession, and he's handed me my pen was a piece of paper, a picture of Crucifix, and he said to meditate on this. That was my penance. Just, he said, look at it and meditate on it for 5-10 minutes. And it said, more he could not do, less he would not do.
Mm,
It really is
powerful.
something to think about that.
It is
Yeah, it's 7
powerful.
words, but it was like, wow. Yeah.
Now, when you walk into the parish, walking on Good Friday, if you've never seen it, it's really shocking just because everything is so bare. You're used to seeing
Yeah.
the crucifix up. Well, the crucifix is down, uh, at least in my
Yeah, we
parish.
usually put like a purple cloth over it in my one.
Yes, yes,
So it's
exactly.
covered, but yeah.
It's
Yeah, and all
brought
the
up
statues
front.
are covered. Uh yeah, then there's usually they bring out, they have a wooden cross that they bring out for Good Friday. So it's like this bare empty cross. And they bring that out and place it in front of the altar. It's real rough hewn lumber. And they place that in front of the altar. And then all the statues, all the any kind of icons, anything like that, it's covered with like a purple veil. And the only thing is wooden cross.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the normal linen on it or anything.
Now, Charles, when you came into the church and
Mm.
you walked into the sanctuary on Good Friday and you just saw that bare cross there. What were you? Do you mind sharing with us like what you were feeling or thinking at that time?
Yeah, I don't. We had just watched. Me and my family had watched the Passion of the Christ, and I never really took into account how violent it was. But and
Mm,
my kids, my daughter was crying so hard watching it, and I was crying too. And it was like, I'm the adult here. I'm supposed to be, not crying like a child, but here I was, completely. I hadn't watched it since it first come out, and I remember how powerful it hit me when it first came out in the theaters, and then seeing it in my house, and it was just, when you think about like really the cost, the cost of our redemption, what it was being nailed to this cross. And it's like, it can become abstract sometimes, does that we don't really, think about it.
right.
And you see Jesus on the cross, and we're so used to seeing that. And it's such a, you see it on people's necks, you see it on the back of cars, you see it everywhere. And it's just kind of this thing that it becomes kind of numb to it. But then to see it in motion, live action, it really makes it more like to where you can really like, wow, you know? And so we
Right.
just watch that. And then I walk in and see the cross. I think I just started crying. I'm 6'6", 250 pounds, and it was just standing crying in the middle of the sanctuary. So probably a spectacle.
No, but I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's just it's so overpowering when you realize exactly what Jesus did for us, and really, it should move us to tears, in my opinion. Absolutely. Anyway, thanks for sharing that. So from there, we go to the Easter Vigil. The Super Bowl is what I call it. My kids think I'm crazy for calling it that, but hopefully one day
What
they'll
was that?
understand.
It cut out. What do you call it?
Oh, I said, and then we come to the Easter Vigil, and I call it the Super Bowl.
Right.
And my
It
kids
is.
kind of
It's what the
laugh at
whole
me.
season
But
was working towards.
so what's happening? Obviously, we're celebrating the resurrection on Easter Vigil, but what's some of the key things that happen during it that's out of the ordinary?
Uh, one of the things that'll stand out, especially I had never been to an Easter. I had been to mass, a bunch of times. I mass kind of irregularly for probably 10 years leading up to coming into the church. And then growing up, my mother was Catholic, so I would go to mass with her occasionally, or my grandparents, but it was an off and on thing. But I had never been to an Easter Vigil. And part of it was because everyone would say, how long it was and stuff. So that really hit me right off the bat was the fact that there was like 5 or 6 readings,
Yeah.
and I think in the missal, so the thing priest has on the altar, the Roman canon, in that I want to say there's 7 like possible old, and then like 3 or 4 New Testament readings, and then the Gospel. In most parishes, you can par that down. You're supposed to have at least 2 or 3 of Old Testament, 1 New Testament, and the Gospel. And we've been at my parish here in Phoenix. They've been building it up the last few years, so they've been getting adding 1 more each vigil, so that we didn't go from a 2.5-hour vigil to a 4-hour vigil 1 year after the
Right.
other. We're trying to strip it a little bit, but yeah, the year COVID hit, I think we were supposed to have like all of the readings, and that's what really stood out to me was like, wow, this is a lot of, especially for a faith that's often accused of not reading the Bible. We're
Yes.
basically reading the entire Old Testament here in one night. That's what it felt like. I was like, wow, there's a lot of, and I love the Old Testament that's my playground. That's where I like to hang. This
Well,
I think that's one of the required ones. It's the account of creation.
right.
Was that?
No, we broke up
Yeah,
for a
it
minute,
starts in
but
Genesis.
yeah, it starts in Genesis, and I think there's one at least every year we read one from there's one from Ezekiel. There's a couple other ones in there. My parish does all of them, so I forget which ones are there. But
Oh
but
yeah.
like you
Well,
but like
with
you said, the
Genesis,
full
it's the
oh, go ahead.
it kind of another thing too. The one I think one of my favorite moments, and I'll look it up sometimes on YouTube and just listen to it. Is it's called the Exultet,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's if the deacon under like the optimum, if the optimum conditions, there's always like if you don't have this person present, you can do it this way, or if you don't have this, you can do it like this. So under optimum conditions, the deacon proclaims the Exalted and he sings it. And a couple of times I've heard that. A couple of times the deacon just got up and read it, and then I think last year it was just one of the lectors read it because the deacon's voice was kind of hoarse or something. Under optimal conditions, the deacon sings the Exalted, and it is just, I love it. It goes through, well, this is the night, that we were led barefoot out of Egypt, and this is the night that, and it goes on and on and on and on, and this is the night that Christ our Lord broke the prison bars of hell and death, and this
wow.
is the night, and it just like, it ties together that this night we're having this resurrection because it come early in the morning, the women, and he was already raised. So it was at some point right around either sunrise or just before, you know? So this is the night when all of salvation history comes to completion, that our redemption is complete with the resurrection of Christ. This is the night. This is what we're celebrating. This is why we're here. This is the night. And that's why he keeps driving that home. This is the night. This is the night. This is the night. I love it. Like I'll put that on in my car when I'm driving sometimes. That's my favorite song.
Yeah, there is. there's so much going on, and the whole point of this episode isn't to spoil what you're going to experience if you're a catechumen or candidate, but sometimes there's some fear of the unknown, and maybe just put you at ease a little bit, but enjoy it, experience it, and there's so much symbolism that you're going to experience just going through it. Whenever I attend the Easter Vigil every year, there's always something new I pick up. Do you feel the same, Charles?
Yeah, yeah, I feel like that. It's like, oh, I never noticed that before. The one that I mentioned to Alex, my friend that I'm sponsoring this year in RCIA, the thing I mentioned to him I don't know if it was at Ash Wednesday, or it might have been the first Sunday of Lent. I said, now notice that now from here until Easter Vigil, you won't hear the Gloria being sung at the beginning of Mass, and you don't hear the Alleluia before the Gospel. Those both come back at Easter Vigil. Also the Mass of the Lord's Supper, but then they go away again for Good Friday. So Easter Vigil, humans, and you hear the Gloria after having not heard it for 45 days, right?
Right.
And it really is like, when you know that, because if not, it's like, well, the Gloria, the Gloria at the beginning of Mass. Yes, but we haven't for the past 45 days. This is a triumphal moment here where we're singing glory to God in the highest. That I love that. I love kind of the desert, like we fasted the Gloria for 45 days, and now we're hearing it again triumphantly at the Easter Vigil when all these new members are coming into Christ Church.
Yeah, there's so much there. Do you have any words of encouragement or anything for maybe someone who's listening to this and is going to be experiencing it for the first time? And anything you want to say to them?
Yeah, you're almost there. Lent's almost over. It feels like, I don't know about you, but for me and for a lot of people told me this, when you start RCIA and they say, like, okay, you want to become Catholic? Great. Start coming to classes in August, and in 9 months, you'll be Catholic. I was like, what? I got to go through all this. The last church I went to, I just showed up at one church meeting, I raised my hand, and I'm a member now. So it's like, how is this so long? But you really come to appreciate it, and this is the way it was done in the ancient church, and the teaching and everything. And you're almost there. The wait is almost over. And the things you do, the wait for longer, it really makes it more special, it feels like. So it's when you finally receive the Eucharist confirmation. If you're being baptized, you get baptized, you go under the water, you die with Christ, and you rise to newness of life on the night he rose for our redemption. It just all ties together so beautifully that it's my favorite. I came into the church Easter Vigil 2016, so this will be, I lost count. Coronavirus has destroyed my concept of time.
6 years.
Yeah, 6 years. So I only didn't go the year of the pandemic because I think we were still closed at Easter, and we brought everyone in on Pentecost that year. But every year I've went, and for the past 5 years I've been a sponsor at RCIA. Once you go through it, I don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
Easter Vigil's coming. Like that's the highlight. That is like you said, it's a Super Bowl. This is what the whole season, of from August or September, but depending on when RCIA starts to your parish, this is what the season leads up to. This is what we've been working towards. This is the highlight of the entire season and it really is the pinnacle of the liturgical year. The raising
Right.
of Christ from the dead is and then Easter goes on. Easter season lasts another 50 days afterwards. And so you can say Happy Easter. We're Catholic, so we can say Happy Easter all the way in the middle of June this year because it's a late Easter. But celebrate the liturgical life as a Catholic. That's what I always tell people is, Christmas doesn't end on December 25th. It starts on December 25th. Easter goes for 50 days after whatever Sunday it happens to fall on that year. So just take it all in and enjoy it.
Right. Charles, thanks for coming on and talking to us about all this. How can our listeners get a hold of you if they have any other questions?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. I'm on there much too long nowadays. But now that I'm Catholic.com is my website. And I'm on Facebook at Now That I'm Catholic is my Facebook page. And I'm on Twitter less and less these days. But Facebook and my website are the two best places to find me. Now that I'm Catholic.com.
All right. So everyone check out the website and it'll be in the notes as well. Charles, thanks for coming back on again. It's always great talking with you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much for having me, William. I appreciate it.
All right. God bless.